The Missouri Capitol has been around for over 100 years, serving proudly as our state's seat of government. But during that time, it has become worn and in need of restoration. These past few years, the state of Missouri rose to the challenge and accomplished major repairs and restoration, concluding in time for the 2021 inauguration. Come and follow the Capitol's restoration, learn a thing or two about its past, and see the steps Missouri has taken to ensure that our Capitol continues to serve Missourians in the future.
I mean, the original was in St. Charles, of course, and then it moved to Jefferson City, and it has been in several locations in Jefferson City, from to the south of the mansion, and then on the site that it's in, but of course that burned, and then when it burned, then it was in several locations. A temporary building was built, and there's a lot of locations. I mean, they used the Supreme Court for a time. They used the St. Peter's Church for a time. For sessions and while they were building the Capitol.
Due to the timing of the destruction of the building, the second Capitol building, the one built on the site of the current one, it burnt to the ground in 1911. Due to the timing and where we were as a nation and the materials being used, the new building could be built then with a steel superstructure, allowing the dome to be larger, the building itself to be larger, and to hopefully be more fireproof.
We have quite a number of these linens, and they depict different sections or plans for the Capitol building.
Those were the original blueprints for the construction of the Capitol building. And knowing the time period that those were made, back then they did all of those on those very large scale hand-woven linen documents, and they were inked in ink by hand, drawn by a person, and those were the original construction documents for the Capitol building as you see it constructed today.
We have architectural drawings relating to the different faces of the Missouri State Capitol building. We also have plans relating to the floor layouts and electrical and heating layouts for the building.
And those were in our flat files here in the Truman Building when I first came to work for the state, and happened upon them when I was down in the flat file room, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'd never seen a hand-inked construction document on linen before, so they were quite beautiful to me.
They're on drafting linen, which is thought to be a more durable material. It was actually requested by some state offices for its proposed strength over a heavier weight paper that some of the blueprints are on.
Yes, so actually the really beneficial thing about with drafting linens, I know we think about blueprints a lot when we think of architectural drawings, but drafting linens were really popular, as Caitlin had mentioned before, for their durability, but also because the surface is starched. So instead of your ink sinking into the fibers of the linen cloth, it actually sits on top of the surface of the starch, and you can actually erase and rub it away. And so actually on this one specifically, there's a lot of sections here where there were previous ink lines that had been removed and other areas had been added.
And I was concerned that those were in this building if something could happen to them, because we didn't have those in a digital format, because at that time those would not have been produced in a digital format. So then we looked into having a company in St. Louis scan those documents, and they were so large that was a problem in and of itself, but we came up with a company that could, and so we shipped them off to St. Louis, had them all scanned, and then we made duplicate smaller versions of them that we still have in the flat files, and got those original linens over to archives to be kept for safekeeping.
Unfortunately, we don't know how many would have originally existed. Right now in our collection we have 175. We have linens and blueprints, so it's a mix of both. Some of these are copies of another, so we have some duplicates, but we do have over 170 in our collection right now, but we can't really say how many there were originally. A lot of these kinds of prints were basically done, like printed multiple times, redone, reworked. So it's really hard to say the original number.
And seeing what this was like to be built before that nice aluminum scaffolding was available. 103 and 105 years ago when they started this building, and they used ropes and pulleys and trees and teams of horses to yank things up and build that. It's amazing when you see that up close that somebody did that, you know, back in 1915, 16, and 17 when they didn't have all the modern conveniences we had today. That made me appreciate people's talents even more.
Yeah, the preservation of the building is so important because we just don't build buildings like that anymore. You know, the quality of the construction is so beautiful, and the workmanship is so precise. You just don't see large masonry stones laid with such tiny grout lines as they did in that building. It's incredible to think about the fact that those workmen had to hand cut all that stone, but yet they did it so precisely. And the workmanship, you know, is just excellent and beautiful.
Again, we're fortunate because of the timing of the tragedy. We were fortunate in that we were able to take advantage of certain materials that gave us a larger building, and that we weren't moved off into an office building. If we were still in the building that was erected previously, it was so small it would not be functional. And the House and the Senate would not be able to meet there. We'd be meeting in an office building, and that's where the traffic would go. It'd become a museum stop, but the number of people that are aware of what's in our building and the artwork just grows every year because we're the active seat. It's the active seat of government. So we hope to maintain that as we go forward.
To me personally, I love Missouri history. And if there's a significant part of Missouri history, as we're here at our bicentennial at 200 years old, the mansion is 150 years old. This Capitol was started in 1915, and the first session started ceremonially in 1919. I mean, there's a lot of history behind this building. We want to make sure that we continue to maintain that history for generations to come. It's just an important part of who we are.
The first Capitol Commission was created after the second state capitol had burned in 1911, and Governor Herbert Hadley commissioned a group of men to serve on the State Capitol Commission Board that oversaw the construction of the first building. And that Capitol Commission Board stayed in existence until the building was completed, substantially completed. Over a period of time, there really wasn't a Capitol Commission in existence. And it was in the early 2000s, in 2000, 2001, that a group of individuals realized that A, that the Capitol, there were needs that needed to be addressed, and B, as we spoke earlier about highlighting the needs of what we needed to do to preserve the artwork. And the art is just such a major part of the building story. And that was when the second State Capitol Commission, and then it was later renamed by an amendment to the Missouri State Capitol Commission, was formed.
The Commission's goal our mission is to help maintain the historic aspects of the building. So we have this eye to the grounds themselves, that they look good for our visitors when they come to the building looks good, and that folks can enjoy the building for years to come.
The buildings here on the Capitol complex, they represent our seat of government, where everybody, you know, places their trust for the state of Missouri. And to me, the preservation of the buildings goes along with having security and confidence in your government. If your buildings are falling apart, if they don't look like they're well maintained, it speaks about the state of the government. So for me, I believe that our work is important because we need to preserve these important buildings, and for the fact of what they are as much as what's in them.
Well, the importance of the Capitol to the people of Missouri is their building to come to see how government works, and sometimes, quite frankly, how government doesn't work very well. and be able to have access to people to where they can come in safely and enjoy the building and the functions of it. You know, when the Senate and House is in session and we have public testimony on legislation that may or may not affect somebody's life, their ability to be able to come into this building and have it in a safe environment and be able to testify or give input on that legislation that's moving is a critical part in the lawmaking process, and it's something we never, hopefully ever, will skip over, is to allow citizens to come here and present their case about why something may be bad or good for their community or their family.
Because it does symbolize our government and our self-government for Missourians, and it's a place where everybody can come and feel like they can speak their mind, express their opinion. It represents to the state of Missouri a whole lot more than just, you know, the exterior stone. It truly is a symbol of democracy.
It's an art gallery. So when you walk through, you're going to see art by very famous artists, all the way from Frank Brangwyn, who completed the Rotunda murals, through a number of artists. We like to call them the starving artist colony that were out in Taos, New Mexico, out in that area. They came in and did the lunette murals on the second floor that chronicled the state's history, and all the way to the famous Thomas Hart Benton mural that graces the House Lounge. We take pride in that, and people come from all over the state, all over the world to see those murals and to see our building.
Well, it was all one big waterproofing project. So the initial study identified basically like 6 phases. Substructure repairs, waterproofing repairs, the sides of the facade and the dome were all identified early on as different phases of the project.
You know, if you go home, you don't let your roof leak, you don't let your barns leak, you know, you fix them. Redoing the front steps, I remember in the day when we redid the front steps of the Capitol. Before that, we literally covered up copy machines down in the basement because if it rained real hard, the water would run in and we had to cover it up with plastic.
And it was sad to see that even you know, in our house chamber and in the hallways, water was penetrating. We had water leaks every time it would rain. You'd see a garbage dumpster sitting out to catch the rainwater, and it was taking its toll.
There are numerous projects that all weighed into this. For example, the Capitol HVAC project did a lot of work to provide positive air pressure within the building, which contributed greatly to the prevention of moisture infiltration. And you can tell when you open a door to a building, if you feel the doors pushing in or pushing out, that's negative or positive air pressure. The building was under a negative, and when the building envelope was not sealed properly and the HVAC system is in a negative air pressure mode, it tends to wick moisture into the buildings.
You don't always see what's going on below grade or below the surface, and a lot of staff work in the basement of the Capitol, and I spent a number of interims between sessions working in our House Information Systems Division, and the staff are all located completely underground.
We're swelling at the seams, and we've got some offices that certainly aren't easy to get in and out of for some of our constituents, especially in the House side of the building. So we want to continue to look at what are the options we can do for that. Is there an annex needed? Is there an expansion to the south side of the building? Is there something else we can do to kind of continue to preserve the legacy, the look, the character of the building, and still, you know, do the people's business?
So we focused heavily on repairs that address safety, structural, and of course, in all of the cases that we did, when I say that, I mean all the different repairs and replacement. We also focused on the historic preservation and the appearance.
So there was a lot of groundwork done to demonstrate and show that there was water infiltration into the Capitol buildings.
So just educating the members and the public, the media. We brought the media down and did the behind-the-scenes tours.
Tours were taken back into the catacombs, and people could see where there was exposed and corroded and rusted rebar, where the concrete had flaked off of the structural steel, and where water was coming in, and to the extent that there were stalactites being created within the catacombs. There were lots of tours to try to basically justify the need for the project, because that's a large expense, and issuing revenue bonds is is something that needs to be vetted and approved by the General Assembly.
Well, at the time, the bonding package was passed by a senator named Mike Parson. I served in the Senate with now Governor Parson when he was a senator, and he put together the package that said, you know, we have some unfunded needs in our state on state-owned properties, and it's about time we as conservatives address those needs. You had to stop kicking the can down the road.
I don't know that even then when we were putting it together, I don't want to speak for the governor, he had put together a package and I think attempted it once before I started working for him. So we knew the extensiveness of the work that would be done, but I really didn't grasp when we were passing the bill exactly, you know, that it would take 3 years and how much of the stone would actually come off.
The bonding package was nothing that was easy to get through. I will tell you that then Senator Parson had to work very hard in a bipartisan manner to get both Democrats and Republicans, not only through the Senate, but then over through the House.
Actually, Tom Dempsey, at the time was President Pro Tem, come to me and says, hey, would you be willing to do a bonding bill? I always remember that conversation when he came to my office, because I said, do you really want to do a bonding bill, or do you really just want to have the Christmas tree effect where everybody puts everything they want in there and it never happens? And he said he wanted a real bonding bill. And that's how part of being in the Capitol, the mansion, preserving our history of our state kind of come into play at that point. And I thought that was one of the priorities in the bonding bill. You got to make sure the value of what it is you're trying to present and what it is you're trying to promote and how you get across the finish line. And why is it important? Well, you know what? It's time. We just couldn't keep putting stuff off for the sake of, well, we just don't want to do it now. Because then it becomes more expensive to try to fix things and repair things. That is our responsibility. The one thing we do have as legislators or state elected officials is to make sure we maintain these state buildings and make sure we prepare them for the future.
Most people don't remember there were kind of two phases. The first phase was taking off the front steps, literally, to replace a lead liner that kept water from coming into the basement, which was the most critical thing that needed to be done. It wasn't something anybody really knew. It wasn't really anything that was sexy. It had to get done because it was really deteriorating the building.
There was some substructure drainage done. The substructure itself was repaired,
which was really a major source of water infiltration.
And it used to be you could walk back into the catacombs, back under the south stairs, and see stalactites hanging. I mean, big ones, because, you know, the understructure is concrete, but because of that, you know, the minerals would be leached out of the concrete, weakening the concrete. So the before and after photographs are pretty impressive. You know, that's been cleaned up back in there. And in and around the foundation, too, there were, you know, they discovered a lot of issues.
There were some structural issues as well where the rebar was starting to be exposed, and we needed to get those things addressed. So that was a very important first phase of this project.
So there was a lot of underground work and all of that was in the phase one that was very important, because you know if a house isn't built on a good foundation, it's not going to stand.
In 2015 they started, ended in 2016, and then in 2018, March of 2018, the groundbreaking for the exterior project. And that's when we really saw the scaffolding going up and the building wrapped up, and drew a lot of attention. It was really exciting to see that happen. But when phase two, the big exterior where they actually went up and scaffolded the building, that started in March of 2018, and the hard stop was the inauguration for 2021.
So there's several things that were done to seal the envelope. There was both tuck pointing, which is replacing masonry grout between stones, and there's replacing sealant, which is, you know, modern caulking, high performance caulking between certain joints that may be expected to have some movement. There was the complete replacement of some stone, and there was also the Dutchman repairs to some stones where just some part of the stone was replaced instead of the whole stone. So one of the concepts behind that was, on a historic building, to maintain as much of the original stone as you possibly can. You know, it could have cost upwards of $400 to $500 million to replace all the stone piece by piece, and that would not have left any of the historic fabric that is currently still in place. So that was thought to be an important factor in selectively replacing stones and repairing the building envelope.
We talk about the Burlington limestone, Carthage marble, there's fissures. Limestone is just it's a sedimentary rock. If you go back to your earth science, it's a sedimentary rock. It's made of layer after layer of sediment, and then it's tightly compressed. Well, what happens is there's fissures in that rock, and over time, as water and as the elements hit the rock, there's those tiny cracks, and as water settles in and freezes, and it's that freeze and thaw cycle, that breaks the stone down.
You bring in a brand new stone, and the goal here is to replace it with the same. But even if you do get the same exact stone, it's not going to look the same till it weathers a number of years down the road. 70% of the stone got some kind of a treatment, repair, refurbishing.
Phase 2 included, it didn't start out, it became more comprehensive. It started out as just a project to address the stone and the stone only. But what happened was the crew that literally climbed the surface of the building and examined and took photos, and then we had drones that actually helped, that they were able to get some really high resolution photography on. They realized that not only did the stone need to be repaired, but there were some structural issues, the columns and the lantern at the top of the Capitol. It needed to be completely rebuilt.
5% of the stone came off the building, but 40% of that 5% was the dome itself.
During construction, as we went up, the very top little piece of the Capitol is called the capstone. It sits on what they call the lantern. And people were telling us all the time that that was leaking, and we all knew it was leaking because there was moisture coming down through there and everything. I'll never forget when they got the scaffolding up to the point where you could get right next to the capstone. It wasn't leaking. You could put your hand through it. I mean, it would have been not too long before Sirius would have just fallen through the top of that capstone. That's how bad it was. And nobody knew that because nobody was able to ever get that close and be up next to it and examine that. And that, when I saw that, I went, oh my goodness, we are not a day too soon to get this thing done. It was really, I'm telling you, I'm not sure in a year or two if we hadn't done something, we would have found out we needed that replaced the hard way. She would have come down, something would have collapsed. It was not good. It was not good.
Initially, we weren't planning on replacing it, but as we developed, during the design development and going into construction, we decided to take a second look at that. Instead of making some fixing to some of these columns, we ended up replacing everything because of the safety concern and the structural damages.
The selection of the stone itself that was used was something that the Office of Administration involved the Commission in to pick.
The stone quarry, original one, the stone came from areas in southwest Missouri, northwest of the city of Springfield. And that stone quarry has long been closed. If we could get stone from the state of Missouri, that will be our goal here, is to, or at least get stone from the same plateau where that stone came from. It'll be the closest thing you can get.
We found the Phoenix marble, which was fairly near where Carthage had been quarried. We found Batesville, which was in northern Arkansas, still part of that same underground vein, and then St. Clair, which was just in northeast Oklahoma. And so in order to select the stone, we did a mock-up, basically where we did some of the stone repairs on the north side of the building, and we used those 3 different stones because we determined that those 3 are the closest looking stone and to the original stone. And so we did some repairs where you could see each of the different stones, but no one knew which stone was what except the contractor. And so we closely involved the Capitol Commission with this. And at that meeting, we all walked outside with the Capitol Commission and pointed out the 3 different stone repairs on the north side of the building. And they did not know which stone they were selecting. But when they looked at the stone, they all unanimously said it looks like this one particular, and we had them numbered, one particular stone looked closest to the Carthage marble, and it happened to be the Phoenix Napoleon Gray, which was a Missouri stone. So we were all really excited about that.
I think that's a testament to not only Missouri, but it stands for who we are as a people. The strength and resilience that marble mined here in our state represents to the body of Missourians, I think is very significant in how this project was able to move forward.
So we were fortunate enough to find out this quarry down in Willard, Missouri, northwest of Springfield, but they also just took ownership of that closed quarry. They used to be, at some point, provided the stone for the original building of the state capitol. And they were glad to work with us, and they actually did the best they could and supplied us with needed stone from that quarry. So there is the electrical coverage of the capitol. That might be an area, you know, we did the light in different, I don't know if you guys can know that, can tell that. And we did it to where it'll be easier to maintain and replace. So we had more coverage, we added more light, everything is covered. There is lights on the upper portion that didn't exist before, and there is a way for maintenance staff to access through a window to go to the outside and actually replace the light bulbs as needed. Yes, we also had a panel where it can easily be changed. So for example, you could do blue for the law enforcement. They had them red, white, and blue before, during the 4th of July.
And if you think about that time frame, we had some extreme weather. We had a lot of high winds. We had flooding that occurred. We had the tornado of 2019. So that extreme weather, that the center of that tornado struck ground up on Capitol Avenue, just several blocks east of the Capitol building. And while the Capitol didn't sustain damage, the protective sheathing that the building was covered in was substantially harmed. And so it had to be basically recovered. So the scaffolding to the building was anchored by, it was screwed actually into the stone of the building. And when you had the high winds, you didn't want the scaffolding to be compromised or for it to harm the stone. So that protective covering was designed, it was tied down with little bungee cords, for lack of a better term, and they were designed to snap at about 50 miles per hour. And so it was, when we got high winds, that the bungee cords would snap, the sheeting would come off, but that was designed to be that way so that the scaffolding itself wouldn't be compromised, because we didn't want the scaffolding to come loose from the building and harm the stone.
And then the pandemic last year. Last year is crucial to the completion, and we were worried about supplies and who's going to show up to work, who's going to be afraid not to show up to work. So we were fortunate to work things out and still complete on schedule.
It was a lot of planning, though, and I'm surprised that the contractor stayed on schedule due to all of the exterior, particularly weather-induced issues that we had during that time. But they did. They were able to stay on time and on target, and they finished up, and that inauguration was held exactly as planned.
The Capitol Commission paid for a new master plan that was done 2019. And with that master plan, it was looking toward adding on an annex to the south underground. And the purpose of that was to try to eliminate the double-decker offices that are on first floor. And
we took information from stakeholders and leadership at the time while it was being developed of the House and the Senate and the governor's office to talk about what aspects were important for the interior renovation. And when we look toward the master plan, the development of the interior, or restoration of the interior, one of the things that we understood from our representatives and senators is they wanted to remain in the building. They wanted to continue to be the operational seat of government. for the legislature.
So the annex, the idea of the annex would be to get legislators back, one in an office and one or two in an office, I think. And then the permanent staff and committee hearing rooms and those sort of things would be permanently housed in an annex that would be adjacent and very accessible to the Capitol through underground corridors or whatever.
We have areas in the building that aren't handicap accessible. Members of the public that are handicapped can't come in and meet with their representative. And so this would eliminate those areas, making them handicap accessible, rearranging different portions of the building, giving them different purpose.
But trying to open up that space a little bit more so that it wasn't as congested as it is right now. So you wouldn't want to build an above ground building in front of the Capitol building. It's like you think about sight lines and how you want the Capitol to remain looking. You know, there's a beautiful visual that's between the south facade of the Capitol and the Supreme Court building, and you wouldn't want to put anything in there that would disrupt that. So that's where the underground annex came into the conversation.
But the annex itself would be a new building. It would be brand new. It would be fully equipped for technology, right? It would have maybe in your outlets, there'd also be a USB port, right? There'd also maybe be an HDMI port. So there'd be that nod to the future and embracing the technology, but blending it so you don't feel like it's an annex and it's a separate wing, that it just feels like another hallway as well. So many of the members had reached out to me after the exterior and just assumed we were moving straight to an interior project. And so I said I would love to. The price tag of that, under the current master plan, is somewhere around $500 million. And so it's a pretty hefty sum. And it's going to take a commitment to get it funded and finished. The other challenge is that if we were to start at the beginning of a freshman representative's term, he may not actually see the completion of the project before he was term limited after 8 years in the Missouri House. And we're lucky to have the building. It's a beautiful building. It's a great place to work. So hopefully there'll be a commitment to invest in the building going forward.
Well, it feels great to see the progress made.
It's hard for me to say one or two things. I think the dome and drum, how that turned out, along with the lighting improvements.
It's good. It's glad to see that we've completed all that exterior work and have the exterior of the Capitol finally all in good shape. I mean, over the years, I've watched us do work on the south facade, or maybe do a little bit of work on one side or the other. Like I did a project on the west Capitol steps and did a project on the west side. It's like oftentimes we don't get a chunk of money big enough to do the entire exterior facade.
And so we've been able to kind of see it to fruition. I didn't think when the project started I'd still be in politics to see this project finished. Well, I'll tell you, when that last piece of scaffolding was taken down, it was a very cool day for many of us because the building just looked like $1 million.
I grew up here in Jefferson City, but I never really realized until after the project was done how weathered the rock had become and the difference in the color and the purity of the stone, you know, shining through.
But the one piece that I do really enjoy was the lights up in the lantern part at the very top of the dome. When you're traveling in from a distance now, you can see that beautiful dome and it's lit. And for me, that is, you know, symbol of the city, and it's a symbol of Missouri.
The best compliment I got was during the project. The scaffolding had moved off the Senate East wing and moved to had been erected around the west side, the house wing of the building. A friend of mine told me it didn't look like we'd done anything to the building. He couldn't tell where the work had been done. And that was awesome because we had taken stone out and put new stone in. And our fear was that it would look like a checkerboard. And so for him to see it, know that it looks clean and looks brand new and polished, but that you can't tell either. And in fairness, you couldn't tell it was as clean as it was until you got around and took off the scaffold on the entire building, and then you just saw how clean it was.
It was almost, it was emotional actually, being next to Ceres up there before they took her down, and when they put her back up, it's what it means, what it resembles. It's pretty impressive, isn't it?
I think it was just kind of, it brought people together. You know, when she came down, there were all kinds of people, big crowd to watch her. The other part of it was historically, it was so interesting to look at the old pictures of Ceres, and when she went up the first time, and like there were ropes and cables connected to trees, and it was just hard to imagine at that time how they got her up to the top of the Capitol. And so for the first time for her to come down, it was just like, this is an awesome event. And then to see her right there, you know, in all her magnificent glory was just fun. It was fun.
I think just I don't have to worry anymore that an office is I'll get a call and an office is going to be deluged with water, with 3 inches of water because an air handler or a roof drain didn't work properly. And it was just a monthly occurrence anytime you'd have a heavy rain. So it's very gratifying to know that the building is we've sealed the building envelope. That's really nice to know because that helps the people within it, not just the art. I've talked a lot about the art, and it's very important, but the human resources that are in that building. It's about protecting the people that work there. And so that's gratifying to know that we've been able to do that. There's more work to be done,
and if there's one thing I can always say about a project is that if it's successful, it's because your team has worked well together and everybody kind of does their part and knows the importance of what you're working on and kind of appreciates that. And so this project, like every other one, is a huge team effort from so many people across the street to our office to the guys doing the work up on the scaffold way up high.
Yeah, I think the tradesmen that not only built this building, 105 years ago, but the tradesmen we had working on the job, and men and women who came with their crafts and skills to preserve this building and put the pieces back together. I think that was incredibly important to that. And too often those folks get overlooked, and the men and women who are carrying their lunch in a bucket here every day, wearing a hard hat, hot, cold, rain, wind, you name it, they were here. And those folks deserve a lot of credit into getting this building back into the shape that she deserves.
It's important for everyone to know that this project wouldn't have happened without the bipartisan support of the Missouri legislature, without the support of then Senator Mike Parson and then Senator Mike Kehoe, now Lieutenant Governor and Governor. They were huge advocates for the historical preservation of this great building. And I think it's very important for people to understand that because of their support, this project came to fruition.
Feeling is that you've played a small piece. Lots and lots of people played a large part in this project. I was just a small piece.
And the team itself in OA did a great job, and I just appreciate their work and their love for the Capitol to make it look as beautiful as it does.
The exterior project was so comprehensive, and there were so many people. You go to monthly project meetings, and I would go to every one of them and sit around a table and look at everybody involved. And these were the foremen and the general, like the superintendents of the project. These were the top key people, but they had crews working, and there were any given day there'd be 50 or 60 different people on different crews working on that building, and how it all just came together. It's a lot of management, and it was really impressive to see that happen.
The building itself just looks amazing, I think, and so very thankful that the General Assembly made the commitment then, and so I hope they make a similar commitment on the interior of the building.
But to preserve this Capitol is the showcase in the center of the state of Missouri. When people come here from other states, they come here to see this and see what Missouri is all about.
It's just hard to say which one or two things was a success, because I just think it turned out great, and I couldn't be more happier to have been a part of this project from the very start.
We've been in this building, we've used this building, she served her purpose, and now we've invested to get it ready for future generations and the next 100 years. And that's a great feeling to know that the shell of this building and the bones now are in good shape to be able to do that.
It's more than just a place where lawmakers gather. It's really a living building, and it's a museum, and it's an art gallery all wrapped up into one.
Well, surprisingly first, because I never thought I would be here in the role of governor when I passed that bill. You know, most of the time when you do a bill, you know, most people don't ever know who handled the bill or who done it at the time. But, you know, to make that to go a full circle, and actually now I get to see the finished product as governor that you never dreamed you would be able to take part in that, and to really see what that work really accomplished and what it meant to everybody, you know, you're proud of that.